All right, so then we call this meeting to order. Do we need to read that statement about being on Zoom?
We should.
I don't have it. Can you read it, please?
Oh,
Or George, do you have
George,
I can get it. Hold on just a second.
it? Okay.
Yes, we should read that. All of our virtual meetings should have that. So hold on just a second while I find my meetings.
say for the audience, you have to forgive us. This is our first committee meeting. We know how to do this for the more formal commissioners meeting. But this is our first public committee meeting.
I had it. Now I've lost it. Okay. Shall I read?
Go
Please.
right ahead.
Pursuant to the applicable law and our determination that attendance by remote means is necessary because an in-person meeting is not practical nor prudent due to the declared public health disaster caused by COVID-19. This meeting is conducted via video conference. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the SSA website shortly.
Thank you, George. Okay. Well, I would like to start by finding out who the people are on this meeting, because there are lots of people here I don't know. So can I know the commissioners? Can we start with Anne? Can you tell us like who you are and what you represent?
Yes, my name is Ann Renna, and I'm serving as co-chair of the Hyde Park Neighborhood Club.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And Chris YW?
Hi, I'm Chris Youngkin Wilson. I'm the development director at HPNC.
I'm sorry, HP what?
HPNC, Hyde Park Neighborhood Club.
NC. Okay. I heard UC and that's why I asked, right? Okay.
Yeah, that would be something else. I don't know what.
Exactly. Right. And Angela?
Yeah, I'm Angela Haber, Executive Director at Hyde Park Neighborhood Club. And as you can tell, I did let my staff and board know that this is happening because we're in Nichols Park and particularly interested in what's going on there.
Great. That's what I need to know. Thank you. And David?
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's Dave White. I'm with the Nichols Park Advisory Council. And we
Okay.
too are keenly interested in all things Nichols Park.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So what I would like to then as a second step here to also figure out is, Rod, you mentioned that each of the items on the agenda has a commissioner who's basically attached to it. Can you tell us who those people are?
Okay, let me pull us back a little bit to the agenda after the introductions. For the rest of us who are on this call, Raymond and I, we are staff with the Southeast Chicago Commission. I am the program manager of Special Service Area number 61. We have commissioners for Special Service Area 61 who are also on here. That is Anthony Beach, Greg Gutman, who is our chair, and George Rumsey. So for the rest of the audience, that's who we are.
And I'm a commissioner too.
Mary is the chair of our, she's a commissioner as well. Forgive me, Mary.
That's okay.
Okay.
As you say, this is our first time doing this.
Right. An explanation of the committee and the meeting rules. The reason that we are having a public meeting is because of the number of members on our commission. The number who are here represent either a majority of a quorum or a quorum. And due to the Open Meetings Act, because we are a public body, we have to have public meetings. We have to abide by that act by giving proper notice. As you saw earlier, George reading the verbiage due to us being on Zoom, that's all a part of the Open Meetings Act. So we're having an open meeting. We posted the minutes. I'm sorry, not the minutes, but the agenda 2 days in advance. So we're following that. The other and more important reason is that we have a lot of items that really are of interest to you. I mean, Hyde Park Neighborhood Club, Nichols Park Advisory Council. It's good to see you here because we have an item of particular interest. I'm going to share my screen and share a map of Special Service Area 61, Hyde Park. Okay, everyone can see the map?
Yes.
Okay. There's a lot on this map, but the most important thing to understand is the areas of blue. And any of the projects that we've mentioned within the agenda we'll be discussing later are all covered by this area in blue. These boundaries, as hard boundaries, mean that we can only talk about those things within the boundaries. For instance, I'll give an example. Hyde Park Neighborhood Club, we know you're closer to the 55th Street end of this boundary. While Nichols Park does, you're interested in things in Nichols Park, our boundaries in just a little bit south of 53rd Street. And Dave White, you're familiar with that, being on the advisory council. Many of the activities that we do happen just south of that 53rd Street, of 53rd Street, but within that boundary. So this is our map. The other things I want to discuss, I'll pull my paper up here, is I went through why open meetings. The order of this will be commissioners' discussion, and we have to discuss it, as I said earlier, within the map. And the last thing is these are projects for 2023. We can't really get into things that would go beyond that because our SSA is it's currently configured as sunsetting by the end of the year. So anything that's happening in 2024 and beyond, we won't be able to discuss it as this SSA is constituted. And from that, Mary, we can get into the third part, which is the programs and discussion. And you asked a question, a discussion we had earlier, which many of these projects that we mentioned before, they were prioritized, not prioritized, they were mentioned by many of you as commissioners. And there is, let's say, a commissioner constituent attached to many of them. For instance, the viaducts. Commissioner Greg Gutman, you have a keen interest, as all of you all do. But Greg, that's been a particular interest of you. The Lake Park landscaping, George, that's been a special project for you. Nichols Park, I think that's many of you. In particular, our guest on this call. But many of you have looked at Nichols Park and asked the question, since it's a major part of our SSA, what can we do on that? Charles, we've just been joined by our commissioner, Charles Newsom. And we talk about the west end of 53rd Street from Woodlawn to Kenwood. And Charles has talked to me a lot about what happens when we get just on the other side, as we go towards U53 and what's cracking in CVS. There are a lot of things that not only would Charles like to see, but many of us would like to see. Dave, I know you were part of those discussions from a neighborhood that we had about a business that's going to locate there. So, I mean, there are constituents to all of this. 55th Street, one of our commissioners who represents it is not there, James Nurse of First Aid Comics. But really, 55th Street, and this is from when I got there, some of the business owners, I'll put it like this, they don't feel like they got the love that they wanted and needed. So I had to convince some of our merchants on there that they weren't in the south suburbs, but they were more like South Loop. They were part of what we see as the expanding downtown district. So Mary, each of these projects, they're very important. They've been discussed. And this meeting is to start to get into some of those discussions, but they all have constituencies attached to them, and they're very important. So our discussion really is to talk about them a little bit and rank them in order, knowing that they all have a deadline date of 12/31/23.
Okay, and then another question related to that deadline date is how much money do we have available to spend on this?
I don't have those figures out, but we allocated that money within the categories for people within the audience. What the SSA does every year is there are about 5, actually there are 7 categories. 6 of them relate to the back end office and salary of the SSA staff. But the 5 are customer attraction, sustainability. My mind's going to slip on getting them all, but there are about 5
That's okay.
areas that we use to devote towards these projects. For instance, the viaducts is in one, I think it's public spaces in art. Don't quote me on that one, but that's where the viaducts come from. Nichols Park, I think, is also within that category. Some of the other things in terms of programming that can go into customer attraction, like 53rd and 55th Streets. There
Okay,
are 5
so-
categories where that money's already allocated, and we have to spend according to that.
So my understanding then is that it's we don't have a big pot of money that we can allocate among these projects. There is money within certain categories that is attached to this. Go ahead, George. You can probably answer the
I
question.
just wanted to add to what Rod was explaining, that if you look at what we had budgeted for 2023, it was, I believe, in the neighborhood of $367,000. And with the carryover that we're going to have from the late collections for 2022, that will add probably another $100,000 to $120,000 to it. So we're getting close to having $500,000 that will need to be spent by the end of the year. That's very, very rough. Don't hold me to those numbers, but it's useful for discussion purposes.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to get a sense of. And then we can, okay, so since these various projects are in various budget categories, we can still we can amend the budget, right?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. All right. So, well, let's start to get a sense of what people's ideas are, what you would like to see under these various categories, and just so we can rough out what we're talking about here. So,
Mary,
Greg, I know you, yes,
Mary,
go
let me
ahead.
break in on terminology. The terms amendment and adjustment are specific terms that the city uses. We
Okay.
can make budget adjustments to move things around as long as they're within a certain percentage. If we do a budget amendment, our budgets go through the budgeting process through city council. So if you use the word amendment, it has to go back through the city council process.
Okay, thank you. It will be an adjustment rather than an amendment. Thank you. So let's just start with the top item on the list, viaducts. Greg, what are your ideas? What have you been thinking about with regard to the viaducts?
Well, I've been thinking about some sort of lasting infrastructure that will be there 10 years after the, after the SSA is gone. And so it's not that it has to be viaducts instead of Lake Park landscaping. It's that it's got to be something physical, because there needs to be some sort of residual value of spending the money this year. I thought viaducts was the most bang for the buck. It connected East and Hyde, East and Central, that are 53rd Street. They're particularly an eyesore and a bad first impression entering Hyde Park as you come off Lakeshore Drive. So I thought you get the most bang for your buck.
And we're talking about both 53rd and 55th.
I would do one first for proof of concept and then do both.
Okay. Does anyone, and George, I know you've been thinking a lot about this too. Go ahead and share your ideas.
Stages. We do the viaduct in stages, and we start with the easiest, which to me, there's two levels which are obvious and easy. One is the lighting. The lighting in the viaducts is atrocious. It's horrible. It's dark. You feel at risk every time you walk through there, even in the middle of the afternoon, because it's so damp and dark in there. Lighting should be something we could take care of. I don't mean switching the light bulbs, but I mean actually finding a new lighting system that would brighten them up and make them much more transit oriented friendly as a way of getting through there. The other side, the other issue that I think is an absolute no-brainer is cleanliness. They're filthy.
Yeah, they're filthy.
Just the sidewalks are filthy. The artwork that's in there, those metal framed art pieces are now covered in graffiti. They're old. They were supposed to be up 5 to 7 years. They've been up 20 years. It's really time for them to go away. If you look at the artwork on the 53rd Street viaduct, at the bottom of each one of these panels, they're called curtains. They're not mounted on the wall. They're meant to be easily removed, taken down, and replaced. And across the bottom of the strip is the list of people that we would need to contact to get them replaced. It's the Chicago Community Public Arts Group, the university, civic engagement, the alderman's office, and that should be a no-brainer. Those to me, to my way of thinking, those two issues should be a no-brainer. Get the lights improved and clean them up, clean everything up. And that should be, I think, well within our budget.
A related question I have to that, there's especially under 53rd Street, there's a lot of flooding. Is that something that we have to get the city to deal with, or is that something within our purview?
It's my understanding that it's the trains, the Metra and the Canadian National. That's why when they were working on 53rd Street and they came up with this idea of hanging the frames, the curtains against the wall, the whole purpose of it was to cover over the flooding, the water, because they couldn't do anything with it. They just couldn't figure out how to deal with it because it comes from the top down.
That's the flooding that's coming along the walls. There's also flooding in the street. And the pillars are deteriorating and crumbling.
Yes. That's CDOT. All of that would be CDOT.
All that's CDOT. Okay. Well, and that brings me to one of my questions about when we're dealing with the lighting and the cleanliness. Some of the problem is the leakage, and the water drainage is creating some of the problems there. And if we invest a lot of money in new lighting, for example, is this leakage, is the water going to be damaging what we're going to be spending the money on? So talking about stages, do we need to get CDOT and the railroads to fix something before we invest the money?
Well, I think when you talk about fixing that kind of an issue, the cost suddenly is going to go up from 5 digits to 6 or 7 digits. It's going to be very, very, very expensive. Now, the fourth ward alderman has committed to bringing TIF funds to this project, but what we can do to motivate that happening, I don't know. We've discussed this for 2 years and it hasn't happened yet. So my inclination is let's go ahead and do something visible. I think lighting would not be impacted by the flooding. The way the lights are installed now, they're not impacted by the flooding. They're crummy lighting. So certain things, baby steps we can go ahead and do. And at least it would have, as Greg puts it, visual impact. People would see it and notice the difference.
Right. In terms of that, and to add on to George, one of the things about any of these assets is they are not all ours. And as the discussion, we've talked about the city, we've talked about Metra, we've talked about Canadian National, the railroad. So many of this would be one, trying to get everybody on board and on the same page, and then trying to come up with resources to get that accomplished. And George, as you mentioned, there are some short-term things that we can get done. Some of that, we're hoping that the cooperation won't take us into next year and that we can get that done fairly quickly.
Well, it's particularly difficult in an election year. And we don't know who the new alderman will be come June, so, and how they feel about this whole issue. But we also just found out recently that there's a good likelihood that the 53rd Street TIF will be renewed for another 23, 24 years. Not confirmed, absolutely, but likely. And for that whole process, we should be actively engaged in pushing the viaduct to something that TIF funding could be used to fix. So when the whole discussion, the community meetings start coming up about renewing the TIF, we should be there saying, look, here's one of our issues we want to bring to the table. Let's do major reconstruction on all the viaducts within the footprint.
Okay, just a point of clarification, if it's renewed, I think it's another 12 years. If it's a new TIF, kind of like a new SSA, then you can go into the 23 years, but I think that you can only renew it for an additional 12 years.
And it's not confirmed that it will be renewed.
Right.
It seems very likely at this point.
And that TIF extends pretty much along Lake Park for a couple of blocks.
Yeah, it does
Let me
not go
bring
down
up the map.
Yeah, it does not go down to the Hyde Park Shopping Center, for example, but it does take in Kenwood High School in addition to 53rd Street.
Right, I'm going to share the map because part of the TIF is on here. We see the TIF in yellow. So the yellow guidelines, I'm sorry, it's in purple. It's in purple. The ward is in yellow, but the TIF is in purple. So here you see the boundaries, and the TIF, it actually does, for those who are in the Hyde Park Neighborhood Club audience, I mean, it does include all of Nichols Park, and you can see the purple lining. And George, to your point, it stops really, you know, it weaves in and out of 53rd and 54th Street. So it's a large part of the shopping center and 55th Street that's not included in the TIF.
And Rod, that 53rd Street TIF, because there are two TIFs on there. One's 51st Street and one's 53rd. How far north does the 53rd go?
1 block. It's
One
always
block.
it's always City Hyde Park. It's that block the City Hyde Park is in.
That's the 51st Street TIF.
That's the 51st.
And then
the
does the
53rd
53rd goes up to meet it?
And around it via the railroad tracks and encompasses Kenwood High School on the other side.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Very odd. All right. Do any of the other commissioners want to add anything more about the viaducts? Okay, so let's do a similar thing now for the Lake Park landscaping. George, you want to start that off?
Can I share my screen?
Yeah, I think I have multiple. Hold on. Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if I can find it. So 2018, the Special Service Area 61 commissioned an RFP and received one good response from Clarence Davids in terms of doing some design work on Lake Park between 52nd Street, from 52nd Street all the way down to 55th Street, and specifically in the area where there are medians with trees and weeds and crumbling curbs and all this other stuff. And they provided a proposal to this multiple pages, overseed, trying to zoom in on this a little bit. There we go. Oversee bare areas and water to establish the center median, better define the medians. Secondly, redesign the medians, bring in summer, fall, winter plantings, break out concrete, fill in with soil and seed in the center islands, the big islands, tree pruning up and down Lake Park, and then monthly maintenance for 8 months of the year. So it'd been a while since I had looked at this process, so I went and quickly plugged the numbers into a spreadsheet. And if we did everything on their proposal, here's what they're proposing: overseed and watering, median renovation, concrete and soil work, tree pruning, adding lights to the trees, and then an 8-month monthly maintenance contract. The total cost of that was $75,876. Now, of course, this was 5 years ago, so it will be more than that now. And we had decided that, for example, something like the tree pruning, may not actually be necessary because we can get that done. We've had that done through the alderman's office, through the streets and sanitations program within each alderman's office. They came out and trimmed up the locust tree. So we can actually cut that amount out of the overall budget. And that puts us down to about $65,000, $64,304 is the cost for something like this. It seemed to me that this would be another issue where its immediate impact, it would have an immediate visual impact and a long-term impact on the neighborhood. Lake Park is one of only 2 streets that cuts across Hyde Park, the other being Woodlawn. It's a very heavily used street, a lot of traffic. And what we talked about with the proposal was finding ways to make it look presentable. I don't think I have the proposal for the plantings that we would use. Let's see. Nope, sorry. That's the disclaimer. But that we actually have a whole list of plants, grasses, annuals, perennials, all sorts of stuff that they would be able to plant into that area and maintain. These would be low maintenance, high salt tolerant plants. They could take the seasons, certain things that would be swapped out in season, other things left up throughout the year. And for $65,000, that's, that's well within our budget, and it's something that we could probably get off the ground this spring if we wanted to.
Hey, George, in regards to Clarence Davis, I'm sorry, this is Anthony. In regards to Clarence Davis,
Yes.
McCaffrey Interests also utilizes them as their
Yes.
client for the university, as well as myself.
Yes.
If it's anything, there is some negotiation power behind that. 'Cause
Yes.
individuals who sit not only at the Chamber of Commerce, but also the SSA, and at the very least, maybe you'd be able to obtain the same quote that you received in 18.
Yeah, we use them for the flower baskets. We've had a contract with them for almost 12 years to do the seasonal plantings in the flower baskets up and down the footprint as well. So they know who we are. They were willing to be very, negotiable friendly when we first asked for the RFP. And I think we know how to work with them. So I think it's a good company.
Yeah, they're working in the area already. So with a number of entities they're already working with in the area, at the very least, maybe they can continue to offer that same proposal despite it being 5 years
Yeah,
later.
amen. Thanks.
Well,
Anthony.
commissioners, there are 2 things to that. One is their current contract is already ended, so I have to put out the RFP. And the second thing is that RFP would go out to anyone. Clarence Davis has been a fantastic partner, especially negotiating with us when the late collections came and extended our payment terms. They do very good work, but would this be something that I could combine in the proposal for the polls that we're doing?
I don't think so, because we've already issued the RFP once. I don't know if we need to reissue it. We might legally, I don't know, but when we did issue it the first time, they were the only ones that responded. And I would probably think that we would want to keep it separate from the other work that we do with them, since they're different areas, different project specifications and requirements. But I don't really know. You know the technical side of it better than I do. So I defer to whatever you think best.
Well, I'm thinking also if we put it in one proposal, I mean, one, they're going to itemize it out anyway. And the second thing is, in addition to all of the partners, Anthony, that you mentioned, that might also give us a better pricing method, since we're having them do a lot more work. We're just expanding the area in which they're doing it.
That makes sense.
And they could coordinate too. I mean, it would make the district look more unified.
The other thing I need all the commissioners to recognize is we are beyond a majority of a quorum. We do have a quorum. So if you choose to make a vote, that is possible. I'm not going to direct you whether you should do it or not, but just alerting you to the fact that there is a quorum and you can make decisions within this meeting.
But it would
Wow.
still be a committee vote. It wouldn't be a commissioner's vote, even if it is
Right.
a committee.
Right. Right, that would be technical, but I would expect you, same 5, to do so in a more larger commissioners vote. So I'm just more or less presenting.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else? Does anyone want to add anything more on the Lake Park landscaping at this point? That's not for us, right? Okay. Okay, so then let's move on to Nichols Park and look at some ideas there. Rod, do you have some something to add on that?
Okay, yeah, 2 things. I need to remind the audience that there is a period for questions and comments at the end. So this is commissioners' discussions. I know there has been, the second part is, I know there's been discussion in terms of the bushes that face the 53rd Street, in some landscaping there. I don't know how deep we want to go into that, but I know there's been a lot of discussion for that. Since Nichols Park is represented, do we want to push that off to the questions and comments period? Or how far do we want to discuss that?
I can say a few words about it because I've been discussing this with Dave White for how many years now, Dave? And we've been talking about that. So my focus has been the stretch of Nichols Park right along 53rd Street, because that's the part that's in our SSA footprint. And you know, those giant bushes are the lilacs that Rod is talking about, and many of us feel like they've sort of become overgrown and intimidating and a barrier rather than an enhancement for much of the street. And I don't think they should all be removed, but I do think they need to be severely pruned and maybe thinned. Maybe some of them could go away. So thanks to David for last year getting the Park District to agree to do a little test on how it works with pruning them, so that we can sort of do additional work with that this coming spring. But the other issue I wanted to mention, because maybe Dave can talk about this when we get to the comments section, is the idea of opening up the plaza area of Nichols Park, the park that has the fountain. We've had conversations about opening it up to 53rd Street so that you're invited into the park rather than you have to find your way into the park. So maybe Dave can talk about that when we get to the comments section. Thanks. That's it.
Okay. Let me ask you a question, Rod. Greg just made a note there that we had scheduled a 30-minute meeting. I thought it was an hour meeting. How long is the meeting?
We scheduled an hour meeting.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, so then, yes, let's leave those ideas on for Nichols Park, move on to the other 2 items, so then we can kind of open things up a little bit more. Charles, can you tell us what your thinking is about West 53rd Street?
Absolutely. I'm sorry you guys have to bear with me. I'm in transit, so I'm trying to keep my eyes on the street while I'm talking, but the concerns are the same concerns we have the other areas that we already discussed, is that we have to be concerned as if though we are the managers of creating a shopping district that's being looked at and welcomed by all areas. So those are some of the concerns that we need to concentrate on. The West End shopping district, considered to be the gateway of the West End. So I know we put a lot of concentration on the East area and Harper Court area. It really has to be some thought given to all the areas like we are discussing. So, and we've had some of those things entertained in the past, but I think a little bit more attention should be given as well. The owners of that plaza are certainly concerned and trying to do improvement things, but you know, there's always a welcome to any assistance that the additional parties that covers the whole shopping district. So those I think we know that and we understand it. I just want to keep it in forefront and all the things we do, because certainly that West End need huge improvements, and the owners know that. So
Charles,
with that,
oh,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask whether the owners have expressed any of their ideas about what they'd like to see or what they're planning to do.
Well, certainly, you probably don't know it as well as I do. The owners, you know, there's been a lot of transition in ownership in terms of deceased owners, and the heirs are coming in, not knowing what's really happening. So that we've been taking in concern, and they do have plans. But when you have that many owners involved, it takes a lot of coming together and understanding and approving certain things to get done. This takes a little longer. And the entity, the way the plaza is set up. So certainly there are concerns about what needs to be done and what they want to do. And some of it is really huge in terms of the improvements that they want to do.
Huge in a way that would affect us?
I'm sorry?
Are there the changes, the huge changes that they're thinking about, would that affect the SSA and what we plan to do?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's beyond what the SSA is talking about doing. These are, you know, these are far distant plans. What we're really looking at, immediate plans to bring about attention to the center that welcomes shoppers. We have a good customer base, but certainly we don't want to lose that. We don't want to relax and think, you know, that's fine. But, you know, the greater plan would be for redevelopment of the center, similar to what they're doing on the East End. But that, like I said, that's a greater plan.
So Charles, are you in conversation with Angie and Creo about this upcoming TIF? Because you
About
should.
the upcoming TIF?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I am.
Good.
And
Good.
And even with the Alderman's office, and certainly I got just a little bit off. Well, I got a call from President Perkwinkle this morning, so I won't even mention what that was about.
That's good.
The plot thickens. My question is, yeah, what my question to Charles, Mary, is what can we do in the next 11 months?
Exactly.
Yes.
Because we can't bridge this money over. You know, we have to treat the reconstitution of the TIF, if it so occurs. We have to treat that one as if we don't really know anything about it, so to speak. It's a conversation that I continue with the commissioners. Some of them serve on the Reconstitution Committee, and we can't talk about current business.
Right.
But
I understand.
It's what can we do in the next 11 months? I had dinner at Cedars Saturday night. Okay. And you know, Dave knows this joke with me. It's why I try not to eat in the footprint, because I never really enjoy myself. I'm always at work when I'm in the footprint. But what are some of the things we can do in the next 11 months?
I think that what we need to do, just bring about thoughts and assistance in terms of what would go well, what we can do immediately to improve the face of the plaza, and you know, and not give a lot of consideration to long term. Just what we can do, like you said, within the next 11 months or so, that would make that connection for our customers to shop throughout the whole district of the shopping district of 53rd Street. We would be more than happy to put together a plan that lets you know what we are thinking about and how the SSA can assist us in bringing that to tuition.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Charles. Can you do that for the next meeting?
We certainly can.
Great. Wonderful. Okay.
And I had
Um,
one question that, just listening while the other meetings was going on and talking about the funds. And one question I had is the funds themselves for the new SSA. Is that going to be a whole new startup that we would get the funds like we got them when we started the first SSA? Or we would have carryover?
There is no carryover. There is a hard stop. You can consider this current SSA as sunset, and a new one begins in 2024.
Okay, so one dies, the other one is born.
Correct. And
Gotcha.
in terms of funds, if you all remember when this one started about 10 years ago, disbursements did not start until August.
Those are my thoughts. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
That
So right. The exercise I went through in 2022 is the same exercise I will go through if we're reconstituted in 2024 in terms of managing finances. I get a year's break.
All right. That answers my question.
Right. We go from bust to boom to bust.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so let's move on to East 55th Street. Now, James isn't here, but has he spoken to you?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and represent 55th Street. I'm going to
Good.
bring the map back up. And really, this is fairly quick because the same issues that Charles expressed in the 53rd Street area also occurs on the eastern edge of the 53rd Street corridor, and it also occurs on the 55th. I've talked to the business owners. I've talked to whoever the property managers might be of those areas, and it seems like all of the activity really starts somewhere like around View 53 and somewhere the Nichols Park area, and it goes all the way to about Lake Park, and then there's just a drop off in the outer edges. So all of the things that Charles mentioned are the same problems, the same issues. It's whether it's how do we generate a lot of activity and programs through those areas, what's the retail mix that we can assist it the best, and in terms of the basic services, we provide those. I mean, we provide the landscaping, the poles, the street things, the cleanings, but it's what else additional do we do? For instance, Dave, I like to pick on you because we work a lot together. We are one of the sponsors for the 4th on 53rd. And that generates a lot of activity really down many of the corridors. And Charles, you've talked to me about this, except for when you get to west end of 53rd Street. So we kind of solved the first problem, but we don't do it often enough. And then the second problem is, okay, what happens when that parade ends? Everybody gets to Nichols Park and then nobody goes any further west of that. So in talking with those owners, all three of those areas have those same challenges. The solutions should be similar in terms of, I think what we do for West 53rd Street, we might be able to apply it to East 53rd and East 55th. But we've got to come up with some programming that bring people into the area and helps highlight or accent those businesses that are there.
So we're really talking about expanding the East 55th to also include East 53rd. We can do that, right?
I think the solutions are applicable, but I think we ought to name them as separate projects so that our attention is focused on what they're named for.
Mm-hmm. that makes sense. But I'm looking at the list here, and it seems to me that it's clumping into like 3 categories. So we've got, since we're talking about East 55th, East 55th, East 53rd, West 53rd all have similar problems and could
Correct.
possibly be addressed with a similar solution,
Correct.
at least
I mean,
for
they
this
are
year.
unique, right?
They're
They are
unique.
unique,
Right.
but you know,
Right.
they
But
share
it's
some
this
common problems.
same problem. And that
Right.
seems to be the same, similar kind of thing with the viaducts and Lake Park landscaping. They're related to each other, and they feed into each other. Yes, the viaducts have their own special problems.
Right.
But they are part of the Lake Park landscaping in some ways.
Right. And they will also help feed into the East 53rd and 55th Street areas as well.
Exactly. So, and then Nichols Park has special issues of its own. So,
Because it's a park.
because it's a park and because we can only deal with one little strip of it. We
Correct.
can't deal with the whole park. Okay. So, now, in terms of setting our goals and priorities, do we have any deadlines about when these things need to be finalized?
There is the hard stop of 12/31, and then there's the practical stop that says you don't do landscaping in October or November.
Okay, but we don't have to submit any budgetary kinds of things. There are no deadlines on that kind of thing. So I'm
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, because we're in the process of our contracts have either expiring or are going to expire. I think the next program committee meeting should cover some of those things in terms of like RFPs, what we plan on doing. We also have to have some discussions with some of the other parties. For instance, the alderman's office, even though we know we're going to get new ones. Metra, the people who are either directly responsible or have a large part in those hard assets.
Okay.
That's something that I need to spend the month of February doing and trying to get that information, not just to the program committee, but the commissioners at large.
Great. Okay, so we don't have to make any of those kinds of decisions today. That's
Right.
what I want to verify. Great.
I would ask that the commissioners here try and rank them in preference, because it just gives staff kind of a guideline of what's important and what should we get done first.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
So we could
they
ask
all need
each
to be done,
commission. Yeah, we can ask each commissioner to do that, right? We don't need to do it as a group. I want to open the
we
floor
do.
to the, we
Yeah.
do, but today,
Not
I would
necessarily
say
today.
I would say state a preliminary preference and knowing that it can be changed or more discussion.
mm-hmm. Okay, and do you want that from today's meeting, Rod, or is this something that people can email to you later? Because if you want it now, let's just do it right now. I'd like to open the floor for the guests.
Question?
That's what I'm.
Okay. Since we just discussed it, everyone can email me the preferences. We can actually open it up to all the commissioners at that point. I'm just doing a poll.
Right. That's what I'd like to do, is open it to all the commissioners, right?
Okay.
Okay. So let's open the floor now to the guests, because I know that you're a lot of people here from the Nichols Park. So let's start with you. Anyone who'd like to speak? David?
I guess I'll go first, and I'm happy the SSA is interested in investing in Nichols Park along 53rd Street. There is a short list of things that you can do that are not very expensive that would greatly improve the experience. And this includes some landscaping, mainly just putting pea gravel or similar down on the curb strip right in front of Murray that's trampled into the point of being just mud now. And, they use a similar types of a gravel or across in front of U 53. And it could be a very similar solution there just to convert the mud into something different. Secondly, we're desperate for more trash cans along that strip of 53rd Street where, we're bracketed by takeout restaurants on either side. And our trash bins are in the park. So when people want to get rid of trash along 53rd Street, they tend to just chuck it into the lilac bushes or similar. So trash cans, maybe 2 or 3 along that expanse where we don't have any on 53rd Street would be a great help. A third item is banners announcing our summer festival on the flag, on the banner poles in front of Nichols Park to make it a more festive experience. I did want to give you guys an update on our lilac experiment. It is proceeding forward. Jerome, he is the Park District Forester in conjunction with the tree keepers, who wants to continue the experiment and basically take out the back half of the Korean lilac shrubs. And our experience last year is that they actually do rejuvenate, which would buy us a brand new timeline for those bushes. And so our thinking is they're planted in 2 rows. We'd continue along the back row facing the park. And then next year, take out the front row facing 53rd Street. That way it provides one set of bushes times to rejuvenate. And they'll be about 1 foot to 2 feet tall after a year. That's our experience with the current experience. And to George's other point, one thing that could be very beneficial for us is helping us plan a redesign of the plaza area in Nichols Park. I really think that should be done with TIF money, but just to get the planning process going, this would be an area that it really needs like a landscape architect or someone to reinterpret that space. We're talking about the area directly in front of the patio in Nichols Park that it projects down to 53rd Street. And I think that a good design would sell itself. A poor design would just raise a lot of hackles about, there goes more parkland. So I think this is the challenge. If we do it right, it'll be a great asset and be welcomed by the community. And which leads to my last plug. When we work together, we always get a better outcome. And I think working with the PAC is the right way to proceed both along 53rd Street and with a patio rethink.
Great. Thank you. This
And
is
I might
helpful.
add, we are in the early organizing stages for the 4th on 53rd. So I will be discussing this with many of you. We need, help at every level of organization and of course sponsorship.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to say anything? Any ideas that you have for 53rd or for any of these projects? Well,
From a commissioner standpoint, I think we have something kind of going for ourselves in terms a lot of the projects are unique in their own sense of creating some kind of systems to improve on them. Once we create a formula for one, it would work for the other. So that's going to be a help in a way that we don't have to create a formula for each and every project.
Right. Right. Looking at the viaducts again, has anything been said about the mural on the 55th Street viaducts? The 2 murals. Has anyone expressed any thoughts cleaning them, replacing them? I know that it was recently, the one on the north side was recently rejuvenated. Just thoughts. Okay. Okay, Well, I think we've come up with a lot of good information to get us started on this. Rod, are you going to send out a notice to the commissioners, or would you like me to draft something for getting their ideas about priorities, rankings?
As chair?
Yeah.
I'm
Or is
gonna
that your job?
I'm gonna set you on your way. I mean, we can collaborate on drafting the letter,
Let's do that. Okay.
because I think it should come from you as chair. And I mean, sending it out is, I mean, that's my job. I can send it out.
Okay.
But in terms of what it needs to say, the direction, you're the committee chair.
We'll work on that together then. Okay. All right. So then our next meeting was it going back to the first Tuesday in February or March?
Yeah, it can go back to the first Tuesday at 11 a.m. Our meetings traditionally were Tuesday mornings. I had a conflict for the next one. It's the first Tuesday of the month. So this is why we moved it to this Monday. But we can move it back.
But now
Or
ours
is
were at
Monday
10
is
o'clock.
better? Ours were at 10 o'clock, right?
The program meetings were at 10, right? I'm fine with either time. I mean, Monday's fine with me. Monday at 11:30 works for me.
Okay, it actually works for you and Anthony.
Okay.
Anthony, are you good with Mondays at this time?
Currently, yes. Yep, Monday works out well.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'll send out another note because the commissioners, while the public meeting schedule had to be confirmed, I'll send a note out letting the full commissioners know that these meetings will now be on Mondays at 11:30. And we have to treat these meetings now the same way we've treated the commissioners' meetings. And George, I assume that the finance meetings, we're opening them up the same way.
Okay. And the program meetings will be on the first Monday of the month? Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, if there are no other things to discuss, we can adjourn this meeting. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you all, and I appreciate not just the commissioners, but the community as well. This meeting ends at 12:29. I'll stop the recording.